acknowledgement of country is something that I can do and that you can do here. The reason that we can do that, and the reason that I can't do a welcome to country, I can only do an acknowledgement of country, is that I am not Gadigal. I am Wiradjuri. And if you're out of country, you can do an acknowledgement, but you can't do a welcome to country. The only people that can do welcome to country are people who are actually from the land that the welcome is being given on. Does that make sense? And I think it's just useful to explain that or to talk about that, because sometimes I get the feeling, not here, that people don't really understand the significance of it. And this is the way that I explained it when I was in the New South Wales caucus. At that stage it included people like Eric Roosendahl and what was that man's name from the Hunter? That was a bit crazy. Michael Costa. Anyway, there was that era. And I thought, my God, how am I going to explain acknowledgement of country to because we were starting to move that way within the Parliament. And it's the way that I explain it to young people in schools. I said, if you can't think about it, it's very personal. It's up to you what you want from it. And I take 3 things from it, but it's the best way to think about it is it's plain good manners. That's what it is. It's good manners. You wouldn't go to the next suburb or down to Wollongong or up to Byron Bay and just walk into someone's house that you didn't know without knocking and asking permission, would you? Well, I hope you wouldn't. Maybe they would.
I don't think so, not this.
So it's kind of like that, and it's the beautiful thing about it is that this is a very, very, very old tradition. It's something that's been done in this country for many, many thousands of years, seeking permission to go on to country and being given permission to be there. And that's where it comes from. And the reason that it's come back into the great prominence that it has now, that a lot of people don't know about, and that's okay, is that we can thank one person for bringing this tradition back, and his name's Patrick Dodson. He's a senator.
Yeah.
And the reason, I'll tell Pat on Monday, I seeing him Sunday night. The reason we can thank Patrick Dodson is that he, for the first 2 trienniums of the National Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, he was the chairperson. I served with him on the second one. And it was through that Reconciliation Council that we decided, with Patrick's leadership, to bring this back to public life. So that's the story of why we now have acknowledgement and welcome to country back. In the Federal Parliament at the moment, as most of you would know, there are 5, maybe 6 Aboriginal people. So let me explain that. We have, in the Senate, we have Malandiri McCarthy, Patrick Dodson and Jackie Lambie. Jackie is the senator from Tasmania, who has many views that I disagree with, but I do like her spirit. In the lower house, we have the first Aboriginal person ever to be a minister, and that's Ken Wyatt. And we have myself. And we also have Bob Catter, who is now identifying, it is true, who is now identifying as an Aboriginal, from, I think the Waka Waka group up in central North Queensland. So that's been a bit of a revelation. But well, it's hard to tell, but yes, thank you, Fran. So there are six people in the Parliament that identify as Aboriginal people, and there really is, from my perspective, the wonderful experience of being in a caucus in the Labor Party where there are 3 Aboriginal people, Patrick, Malandiri and myself. And the funny story about that is that in a caucus room, I guess it's in any room, where people have been for a very long time, in the Labor Party caucus room, and I think it's the same in the Libs, there are seats like this, and around the edge there are lounge chairs. And you only get to sit in a lounge chair after a very, very, very long time. And you're very senior within the party. Well, Patrick and Malandiri and I have not observed this protocol. And we have claimed land rights in the Labor Party caucus room. And we sit on the lounges, so, and nobody's arguing with us. But the serious side of it, everyone, is that it is so... I've come from the New South Wales Parliament, being the one Aboriginal person that's strongly identified, and that was a fairly lonely experience. It was a difficult experience. It was an experience where you didn't feel... You felt very supported, you felt very loved, you felt very respected. But you were the only person, and that was challenging. So what's amazing now in the Labor caucus is that we have 3 people, and of course 3, I think, really significant Australians, if I can include myself in that, if that's okay. But you know, Patrick Dodson and Malandiri McCarthy. Patrick Dodson we all know. Malandiri McCarthy is an extraordinarily beautiful human being. She was a minister in the Northern Territory legislature, and she was the ABC 7:30 anchor in the Northern Territory before she became a Member of Parliament. So she, as an Aboriginal woman, was in the mainstream media in a very, very key position before becoming a Member of Parliament. She's also from, oh gosh, what's the community she's from? Northern Territory, up the top. No, not Maningrida. It'll come to me. But she's also, through her family connection, she speaks language, as Patrick does. And she's also been one of the key people in a native title determination and claim for her mob. So she is extraordinary. Within the Labor Party, everyone, we have what's called an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander caucus, and it is one of the most active, influential caucuses that we have. It meets every week, as all caucus committees do when Parliament's sitting, and we have about 20 members of that caucus, and that is just so fantastic. And it drives policy, it drives direction and decisions on behalf of the Labor caucus in the Indigenous affairs space. And it is so wonderful to have that caucus. It includes people like Warren Snowden, it includes the Shadow Attorney General, and also a whole lot of members of Parliament. And to have 20 people on a caucus committee says something very powerful about the status that caucus is placing on Aboriginal affairs. And of course, the leader of the Labor Party, Bill Shorten, is the Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs. And Patrick Dodson is the Assistant Shadow Minister for Indigenous Affairs. And that just is because Bill felt that he wanted to make sure that people understood that Aboriginal affairs had a very high standing within the Labor Party. So that's a little bit about how things are structured in there. Can I just go to the Uluru statement? You're probably sitting there thinking, what on earth is going on with constitutional recognition? And that is a fair enough thing to think. I won't unpack it all, and I'm happy to answer questions on it. But essentially, you and I had travelled the journey for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, thinking that constitutional recognition was about 2 things. It was about recognising Aboriginal people in the Australian Constitution, and it was about changing the 2 sections of the Constitution that are commonly known as the race powers. That was how we'd been travelling for a long time. Then the Referendum Council, led by Pat Anderson and Mark Liebler, delivered its final report to Shorten and Turnbull in
end of
June. That said something completely bloody different. And it said that explicitly they did not want the Parliament to deal with the things that we had been travelling with, and that is the race powers and recognition of First Peoples in the Constitution. So what the Referendum Council came back and said, and these were the words, take it or leave it. And they said that they didn't want the Parliament to deal with the race powers, and they didn't want the Parliament to deal with recognition. They just wanted to deal with 2 things. First, an Indigenous voice to the Parliament, and the formation of a Makarrata Commission and a troop turning process. Now, none of that had been discussed up until Uluru and the 12 dialogues and then the delivery of that report. So where does that leave us? Sorry, I will get through this.
There's some water over there.
Brandy. I'm driving. So where does that leave us? What we have done is written to the Prime Minister suggesting that the Prime Minister establish a joint parliamentary committee. Now that might sound like, oh no, not another committee. But joint parliamentary committees are extremely powerful and extremely important. They are chaired by the Prime Minister. And that parliamentary committee would have a life expectancy of 6 months to explore the issue of what Uluru has said and what other panels have said over the 6 years, and formulate a time frame and a question to provide to the Parliament by the end of the year so that we could deal with this in the first part of next year. That is what Labor has said to the Prime Minister. We are going to back in the notion of an Indigenous voice to the Parliament and the formation of a Makarrata Commission, but that doesn't mean we're not going to deal with those other issues. We want to establish this joint committee to consult, to have a look at what's been produced and to come up with some way forward. The Prime Minister has written back, not accepting that proposal, but not rejecting it either. The Prime Minister has come back saying that he wants to take this through his cabinet and then his caucus. Fair enough. What's the time frame? I think that this is going to be kicked into the long grass, and if we are not careful, nothing will happen. That is my sad assessment. So it's really important that groups like you and myself and the Indigenous caucus pursue this issue arduously. Because, and I can say it here, the assessment might be from yourselves as well as me and others, that the Prime Minister has so little political capital. You tell me how he's going to convince his mob that this should happen. When you think about what he's got on his plate, he's got the equal marriage stuff, which he has sold his soul over. They cannot even agree on a clean energy target, which is the biggest issue facing us in this country. So why would he be able to convince his caucus and his cabinet that he should agree with the Labor Party and set up a joint parliamentary committee? That is where we're at right at this very point in time. Does that make sense to people? So the Labor Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander caucus is absolutely determined to pursue this. We are of the view that you cannot ignore the race powers. At least they have to be dealt with, because we cannot go forward as a country with two sections of the Constitution that are plainly racist. First is the section 122. Section 122. I'm so full of germs.
Linda, I got it.
How good is that? Excuse me. Section 122 still gives state governments the power to deny Aboriginal people the vote. And section 5126 is the section that you'd be most familiar with, and that is the section that says that the government can make laws or rules or whatever you want, I can't remember the exact words, about any race of people. Now, you would expect that governments would make laws that benefit groups of people, but we know that that is not necessarily always the case, and it's also possible that future horrible governments could continue to make laws. But we can't get rid of that without replacing with something, because that does help us in terms of the native title legislation. So they're the two pieces of the Constitution I don't think we can ignore. We've got no trouble with a Makarrata Commission or truth-telling. And the ironic thing, of course, is that you do not need constitutional reform to establish an Aboriginal body. There's been the NAEC, there's been ATSIC. So even if there isn't constitutional reform, us as a party will pursue these issues anyhow. So I just want you to be assured of that. Now, can I just move on to Captain Cook and Governor Macquarie and them fellas? You would note there's been this quite crazy discussion in the newspapers, forensically and fervently followed by the Australian and the Daily Telegraph, which I've been a little bit involved with. And the position that the Australian and the Daily Telegraph have been pushing out over the last 2 days, that Shorten's backed away from it, and it's just ridiculously stupid. What I am arguing, and what the New South Wales Labor Party passed at its conference just a few weeks ago, is, let me see if I can get this straight. So the Labor Party conference passed the idea that we would explore the establishment of a new public holiday that celebrates Aboriginal Australia, that celebrates, you know, the extraordinary history that we share, the heritage that we share, and having the longest mob on earth, which I think is probably worth a public holiday, wouldn't it? Yes. So that's sitting there. And the New South Wales Labor Cabinet, Shadow Cabinet, resolved just recently that there should be a new public holiday, interestingly, and I thought it was pretty obvious, replacing the Queen's birthday. It's not even her birthday in June. So that is sitting over there, okay? Over here we have this debate about plaques and memorials and so forth. The position that I have put forward consistently is that you don't get rid of those statues. Of course they're important things and parts of our history, as are the people that are represented in those statues. There's very few women except, you know, Mary and Elizabeth. Oh, Mary really. Victoria and Mary. Lots of Victorias and Marys. And there's very few women represented. And obviously no Aboriginal people represented, except for the new installation in Hyde Park. I don't know if you've seen it, which is quite beautiful, remembering Aboriginal people that were parts of the war efforts. My argument is that, and Jane and Eva and many others, Charlene and others, would remember, and people kind of look at me going, why aren't you more upset about this one? Sorry, seen this debate periodically on, it was used to be about using the term invasion. How many times do we have that? Serves up every 5 or 6 years. Same thing. So my view is that those statues should remain, those plaques should remain, but there should be an additional plaque giving some context to what the first plaque was saying, because it's important that we have those things out there. It's, you know, it's really important. So that's been my position. There's been lots of other positions, but I won't go to those. So where the Labor Party is at, and I think where the politics of this is that because the Libs are in so much trouble, they are trying to paint Bill Shorten as a socialist, which is ridiculous, and a fascist. Well, he's gone from a fascist to a socialist, I think. A revisionist history, and you'll remember how dangerous this can be on a serious point. Go back to the history wars with Keith Windshuttle and the shocking stuff when Hanson put her head up, you know, the white picket fence, the black arm view. So it's dangerous, and it's not just words. I think people that weren't part of that debate don't understand how dangerous it can be. So I will continue to propose that. But the other thing is this, and this is something I didn't know about. I got interviewed yesterday by NITV. There are still 4 or 5 places in Queensland that have nigger in there.
We just went, I think.
Yeah, it's just about to go.
Yeah.
In the nigger something creek. Yeah, 4 or 5 places in Queensland. Now that's just not on. Really. So the sensible thing is that one of the government agencies, National Natural Resources or something, I can't remember the name of it, have decided that those names will change, maybe using an Aboriginal word, but the original disgusting names will be retained in historical maps and so forth, and I think that's a really good way through. But the other thing is that, you know, and you would have all seen this, and I'll just give you my personal experience. I was on my own, I was driving between Griffith and I think Narandra, and it was on that back road through there. And I knew the story, but I didn't know where it exactly happened in my country, in Wiradjuri country, down on the Murrumbidgee. That terrible story of what happened to that group of people that were driven up a creek, one of the tributaries of the Murrumbidgee, herded onto an island and slaughtered. about 40, 42 people. I drove over that creek and the sign was Murdering Island. And I actually had to stop the car and get out to collect myself, because they would have been direct descendants of mine. Direct descendants. You drive up around Tenterfield. There's a place called I think it's called Black Gin's Leap. This is where a group of Aboriginal women with their kids were driven over a cliff. And these names are all over our country. If you've ever been out Brewarrina way, Slaughterhouse Creek, Hospital Creek, Black Man's Bounce. I mean, you know what these places are. So the argument or the discussion is, do you change the names or don't you? I don't know what I feel about that, but I kind of think I feel, well, let's make sure that those, if you change the names, that event's not there. So it's a very complex, complicated issue, isn't it? But this is good, because we are finally having this major discussion about place names and places. But I just say to my party and to people, don't dismiss this. It's important. And we all know as Australians just how important symbolism is. I just wanted to touch base also very quickly, and I don't know that I need to do it very much in this audience because of the audience, is that of the 7 closing the gap targets, only 1 is being met. And we are now 10 years in. Next year will be the 10th anniversary of the apology. The only target that we are meeting is that Aboriginal people that go to university are getting employed at the same rate as the rest of the population, which is fantastic. But what's not fantastic is all those other targets around health, around literacy, morbid, I can never say it, dying early. All of those targets are way, way behind and are not going to be met within that time frame. So I think that's a really important point for us to consider. And I don't need to go through this audience on what those statistics are, because you know them. So I won't, except to say that one of the things that we are pursuing very much within our caucus is the 3 priorities that we have is around incarceration, the children going into out-of-home care, and domestic violence. They're our 3 priorities. And then the more macro one of constitutional reform. That stuff, and some of you would know this, the number of children being taken into care, it's an interesting way to put it, is incredibly high, much higher than it was during the stolen generations. And one of the things that I find very disturbing is that some of you will remember that when I was the Minister for Community Services in New South Wales, we put in place the Aboriginal placement principle. So if an Aboriginal child was removed, every effort was made to place that child with kin, and if not kin, someone from that community. That's just been abandoned. That is just, it's just gone. So I think that's very, very, very disturbing. And what we want to see, and Abbott would not do it when he was Prime Minister, Turnbull's made some noises about it. What we want to see is a target around incarceration at least. But there is enormous resistance for that to happen. And I don't know how we're going to break through that, except to let you know that that's one of the major things that we're pursuing. I think I might stop soon, and then we can have a break,
Yep.
and people can ask questions. Is there anything that I haven't covered?
They'll ask. It's okay.
They'll ask.
Yeah.
All right. Is that cool with you? Is that good?
Yes.
Has that made sense?
Yes.
Even though I've got a lolly in my mouth. Oh, that's good. All right then. Well, let's have a break, and then we can come back and ask questions.